Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Hi, I'm Zachary Horvitz. First, I would like to thank my father, Eric Horvitz, for allowing me to come to speak to you today. It's an honor to be here. I am here today to spread awareness about two great organizations as part of a service project. These organizations are named the Decision Education Foundation and Save the Children. First, I will talk about Save the Children, and then Chris Spetzler, Program Manager of DEF, will talk about the Decision Education Foundation. Okay, here we go. So, Save the Children. What is Save the Children? Save the Children is an organization that makes sure kids get a good education. And here is a group of girls right outside a Save the Children supported primary school in Bostown, Afghanistan. Okay, what is the problem? Millions and millions of children worldwide never get an education. The only way for communities to rise above poverty is to give their children an education. So what is Save the Children? Save the Children is a nonprofit organization started in the 1930s dedicated to the welfare of children all around the world. So far, it has brought hope to communities in such places as Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Save the Children delivers vaccines, medicine, and helps kids to ensure they get an education. Now, DEF, the Decision Education Foundation. DEF is a nonprofit organization that works to ensure that all kids learn how to make good decisions. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Chris Spetzler, Program Manager for DEF.
Thank you, Zach. And I also want to say my thanks to Zach for inviting me and also to all of you for coming and being here today. It's a pleasure to talk a little bit more about what the Decision Education Foundation does. Now, I understand that there might be a few hands to this next question, but how many people in this room have had some level of formal decision training in decision sciences? Okay, so now that's actually quite a few. We've got a self-selected group here, right? So you actually know what I mean when I talk about decision sciences. When we ask a group of teachers, and usually we have classes the size of 30 or more, maybe we'll get one person raising their hand. And that will usually be someone that had exposure in the graduate level, right? Well, we feel that that is one of the biggest losses, both for teachers and also for students, that decision making is not something that people know is a science where there's knowledge that is developed around it, because all human beings face decisions, and it's never like kids get sat down. They get the birds and the bees conversation, but they don't get the here's how to make a good decision conversation. And we want that to be something that is part of everybody's education, because decision making, it's the steering mechanism we have to shape our futures. And if we don't have it, then we're just at the mercy of whatever comes down the road. And sometimes for many young people, that takes them in a direction that is not positive at all. So with DEF, there are many organizations that talk about this is what you should do. Just say no, right? This is how to answer. Well, what we would say is make your own choice. It should be a well-reasoned choice. Likely you will come to the conclusion that saying no is a more productive answer. But know what your reasons are and what your values are and why that's what you choose, not just because someone is telling you to do it. And we also know that telling young people what to do doesn't work very well. They have to own it. They have to make it their own. So DEF, our tagline is Better Decisions, Better Lives, and that's because we believe that if people make better decisions, they're going to have better lives. Now, we can't guarantee with every decision that if you make a better decision, you're going to have a better outcome, because we know that there's a separation between the decision and the outcome. You can make a good decision and have a bad outcome. You can have a bad decision with a good outcome, right? You could, for example, potentially make the bad choice of getting in the car with someone who's been drinking and get home safely. That doesn't make it a good decision. It's just a good outcome, right? Well, consistently better decisions over time will lead to consistently better outcomes. And that's why training and decision making is helping people to get there. Now, DEF's been around since 2001. We have strong ties to Stanford University. Eric Horowitz and David Heckerman both did work at Stanford under Ron Howard, who is kind of the guru of decision analysis there at Stanford. And they were also co-founders of the Decision Education Foundation, are currently directors on our board. And what we believe is that everybody needs to be learning about decision skills, and it's something that should be a part of the educational drinking water. So that when a senior gets out of high school, if you would ask them, what does it mean to have a quality decision, they would be able to tell you, this is what it means, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the 6 elements of good decision making and the decision making chain. You all have a booklet in front of you that will give you some more information that I can't get in a 20-minute talk, and I hope that you'll take that to other people as well. But everybody should have that idea on the tip of their tongues. This is what a quality decision is. This is how I've made those choices in my schoolwork. For example, how I chose a college, what career I'm looking towards, what classes that I've taken. In fact, when we work with teachers, that they come to our classes, they think, well, I'm an adult, I know how to make decisions. I'm here to learn how to teach the kids who don't know how to make decisions, and they're making terrible ones, how to make decisions. But when we ask them to raise their hands, no one's had the formal decision-making training, and by the end of the day, they've come to the conclusion that they never learned this, they like it a lot, they want to apply it in their both personal and professional lives. In fact, often when we have a workshop, I'll have a teacher come up that's had a transformative experience and say, I feel like I became an adult, or I woke up this week because I went home, I talked to my husband, we haven't been making such good decisions. We've decided we need to apply this in our own lives. And I say, watch out, next week we're talking about personality type. It's going to turn everything upside down. Mentioning personality type, that's a part where we say, we like to balance head and heart in any decision. So this isn't just strictly rational logic, decision analysis in the normative sense where it's all about the numbers. It's also about balancing that logic, that reason of the head with the heart. So if you don't have agreement between those two, then there might be something that you need to dig deeper to figure out what's out of alignment. So here is the good decision chain, and these are the 6 elements of a good decision. They are the helpful frame, which is what is it that I'm deciding? So being clear about what the decision problem is that you're facing, because if you get the right answer to the wrong question, at best it's going to be even, right? At worst you're going to lose a lot of value. Clear values, what is it that I care about? What do I want to get in this decision? Creative alternatives, what can I do? So often this is a great source of value because we know human beings kind of see the thing that they want to do and the thing that they don't want to do, and that makes it easy, process of elimination, do the thing that I want to do. They don't spend any time creating alternatives, brainstorming, right? Useful information, what do I need to know? And this is where uncertainty comes in, where probability starts coming in because decision making is about the future, and the future is uncertain, and therefore we need to be able to handle that. We can use sound reasoning in order to bring together the uncertainty in information, the alternatives, what we can do, and the values, what do we want, and do it in a way that we can be objective. And finally, commitment to follow through, actually doing it. Because if you don't follow through with the decision, it's just something that you make in your mind, then it really isn't a quality decision. So we have these 6 elements here represented as a chain. Why do you think we've put it up there as a chain?
I was wondering the same thing myself.
Wondering the same thing. Is anybody willing to hazard a guess?
Only as strong as its weakest link.
Only as strong as the weakest link. Right.
If I'm reading ahead in the brochure, you will, right?
I also have a 13-year-old.
Also have a 13-year-old, yes. Okay? And that's exactly the point. It's only as strong as the weakest link. Also, all of these elements are linked together. So if you don't have strength in one of them, that's what's going to define the quality of your decision. And often people, you will ask them, how good was that decision you made? And they'll say, I'm 90% confident it was the right choice. And you say, okay, well, let's go through and rate these different things. How was your frame? Well, it wasn't that great. I didn't think about it very much. How much information did you have? Well, I didn't gather any information. Well, it sounds to me like you had about 30% decision quality, but you're 90% certain. And that's a big eye-opening experience, because we leave a lot of value on the table rushing forward in life and not stepping back and declaring decisions. So if we would just have people take a trip around the chain before they rush into something, I think that we'd create a lot of value right there. Before I move on, that was a very quick overview. You'll see more information in the booklets here. And I hope that what you'll do with the booklets is, first of all, you'll read it yourself. And then potentially you'll give it to somebody else to read. And I'm thinking about it in the following context. So, Zach, how old are you?
13.
You're 13. And it turns out I've got a nephew named Zach as well. And this is an anecdote about my father interacting with his grandson, Zach. And this is something you might think of doing, right? Because you might know somebody that could use some decision training. So Zach was out visiting in California for the summer, and some things that he was going to do fell through. And my father, thinking on his feet, said, Zach, I'll give you $20 if you read this fundamentals booklet, and you can explain to me what's in it.
You mentioned that Carl Spencer is a renowned probability assessment expert.
There you go. So I'm second generation in this, right? I grew up being practiced upon. And so Zach thought, hey, that's pretty good money. I'll go ahead and do it. And he read it, and he was able to talk to it back to his grandfather very well. And so he got his $20. And then my father did the next thing. He said, well, I'll give you $20 more if you can apply it to a decision. So Zach went back, he thought it through, he applied it to a decision, and they had a follow-up conversation around decisions and decision-making that was really kind of a breakthrough conversation. And one of the breakthroughs there was, my father asked, well, how many of these really big decisions do you have? And Zach said, well, someone my age, most of the decisions are being made by the adults, but I don't have a lot of independence in some of these. Well, maybe last summer when I was making a choice of what school to go to, but many of the decisions are kind of in the moment. Well, then again, let me think about this. Some of these in-the-moment decisions that I'm making all the time, it would be a big decision if I would think it through about how to handle all of these in-the-moment decisions. In fact, that would take a lot of effort to really change that. And that was like a really profound, deep insight, to recognize that in order to change some of these decision habits that he had, he would have to raise it from the unconscious to the conscious level. He'd have to figure out how he would want to change, and then he'd have to really practice in terms of the change. So that was the first big insight, was from this conversation. So then we get a call from the grandmother on the other side after Zach has left. And she says, what have you been feeding Zach? And the following thing happened. So Zach has a brother who's 15 years old. And he was talking to a cousin who was 23 years old. And the cousin was just getting his new apartment. He had graduated from college. He was kind of struggling with decisions. And the older brother says, you need to talk to Zach, because Zach's had this decision training, and he can help you with this kind of thing. And so they called Zach over, and Zach says, what's the decision you're dealing with? What's the frame? Well, what do you really care about? What's the values? What do you need to know? And helped him in this situation, and the grandmother sitting in the background going, what was that all about? Right? So when I present to young people, I say the reason that you want to learn this stuff is because it will really help you in getting to have more decision power with your parents, and maybe being a better negotiator, although I'm not sure that parents necessarily want to have them trained without their training coming to the parents as well. So these are some of the organizations that we're working with. Here in Seattle, we have started working with the Seattle Academy. And what we do when we work with schools is we work towards the whole school community, because we don't want to have the kids learn about decision making and come home and say, for example, oh, you're doing it all wrong. This is how you make decisions. That wouldn't get us very far. So training for the adults as well as the young people, integrating it throughout the school so that no teacher has to carry it themselves, that it shows up in various different areas. So we've developed curriculum in English, curriculum in history, and in life skills. And then we're also working with organizations that mentor and develop youth. And for example, Native People for Cancer Control is here in Seattle, and they're working with the Native communities. They've created a project where they're teaching students through teaching them how to make comic books. And they're also interested in a health message, and healthy choices is something that then the kids do a comic book around what kind of healthy choices would lead to things, for example, like decreasing the chances of getting cancer. For troubled youth, this is an important thing. One of the students that was in our course said, this is going to help me a lot because I could have made a lot of, I've made a lot of bad decisions in my life that could have been easily avoided. And this is kind of what we're trying to do. Arm people with good practical decision tools, and then also making them aware that decisions are happening and being able to seize that decision power. So thank you very much for your attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have after this session, and I'd very much appreciate any further communication at the DEF for those questions, and I'll hand it over to Zach.
Thank you, Chris. You can donate to Save the Children and DEF at the Microsoft Corporate Give Program, HTTP Give, and tell them. Are there any questions for Chris or for I? Any?
Mike? Yeah. So what made an impact on you? How did you do this other than the normal way you do in school? You memorize, and if you can make some personal contact with it, with whatever you're trying to learn, it usually stays with you longer. So how did you learn this yourself? Did they keep giving you personal examples like Chris did, or what?
Well, I really learned all I know about DEF from my dad, who ever since I was in my mom's stomach, I've been listening to my dad influence me with these ideas. So I really.
Exactly, it's a good probability assessment, right?
So when you're about to dart out between two cars to chase a ball, do you go through this in your head?
Yeah.
You don't draw a decision tree for that one, right?
It's automatic.
Yes, please.
I have a question for Chris. So, am I right that one of your main activities is going around to students and giving these seminars? Do you give the seminars to students or teachers, or both?
So we teach primarily the teachers, because they're the ones then that can go on and teach the students. But also we need to develop curriculum so that the teachers have something that they can work with. And it's not such a huge thing that they need to do in order to develop this material. So we're also working with students, and I've had the opportunity to teach directly to students that are in, for example, East Palo Alto, which is kind of the other side of the highway near us. And it's something that resonates with kids. Once you get them talking about decisions that are their own decisions, that's very relevant, and they get very excited about it.
And also, adding to what Chris says, recently, DEF people came to my school and gave a talk for the 6th graders. A lot of what they said stuck in the 6th graders' mind.
So look at these materials. You have additional materials with more vivid examples where students can see, okay, here's a dilemma. What would I decide in this case? Kind of more examples of case studies that you've collected.
Yes, and so on our website there are more curriculum materials that are available, and this is just kind of without giving you the full information pack. I think that this is probably the best summary that I could give you in terms of what it is that we're trying to teach, and is also pretty accessible.
I'm just going to get back to Mike's question. Can you comment a little bit on the difference between decisions that you make with careful deliberation and those that you make more quickly? The sort of blink idea.
Yes, definitely. So how about we actually open up the booklet? And one of the things that you'll notice is we've got a page for each link in the chain, but on page 4 you'll find this distinguishing types of decisions. And so you mentioned blink. So Malcolm Gladwell, very popular writer. And what he's talking about in terms of blink decisions are these in-the-moment decisions that are going on around us all the time. One of the distinctions that's made by scientists in this area is system 1 versus system 2 kind of thinking. So when do you go to your deliberative mind, and when are you kind of in the moment, fight or flight, that kind of reaction. So with a big decision or a significant decisions, that's where you've actually got the time to think it through, and where it actually rewards spending some time. So with a big decision for a young person, that might be choice of college, choice of career, maybe choice of which activity to drop, because many kids are overscheduled and stress is one of the leading things that they end up with. In the moment is, you don't have time to think and you don't want to think about it. Now, one thing that's interesting about Gladwell, with Blink, he kind of says, hey, intuitive decision making is where it's at, is the theme of the book. If you read it very closely, he doesn't say that entirely. And if you read his next book, Outliers, he says that Blink only works if you've had 10,000 hours worth of training and you're an expert in an area.
So when Malcolm was out here, I had a one-on-one session with him for about a half hour, and I gave him a very quick, fast-paced decision analysis lesson, and we talked about how the amount of thinking you do on a problem depends on a meta-analysis, and here's how it works. And it was all news to him. That it might vary based on context, and he was overly committed to this Blink concept, which was intriguing in his book. So he actually was quite open and interested, and actually, I think he blogged about this discussion somewhere on his website.
We should follow up with him, because he's done
two ends of the spectrum now. Right?
Well, he's had a tremendous amount of impact with that book, so it's really a lot of popularizing, especially of the behavioral side, and it is exciting stuff. But the behavioralists have a lot to say about where we fall down. They have very little to say about how we should make decisions. And so that's where there's a lot of insight here, is how do we actually improve? What's the best way to go about it?
So one thought that comes to mind is, even when you're trying to deliberate upon something, one consideration is your affective state. If you're being negative or positive. And I mean, there have been studies that show that depending upon your affective states, it can influence the decisions you make, even after deliberate rationalizing, right? And so, I mean, would you how does it would fit in this framework? I mean, in the role of emotions in the whole decision making, and how to sort of control that? I mean,
So one thing I want to say before I say there's an answer to the question is that I'm not the first person that came up with either the questions or the answers, because I've had questions like this myself. But seriously, Ron Howard, he's got an answer for all of these things, and there's an answer in the book. There's an answer in the book. So if you go to the page 17 and 18, you'll see on page 18 there's this idea of decision fitness. So I mentioned that we want to balance head and heart. And broadly, that's affective state and affective drives with kind of the logic side. Okay? So when you're not decision fit is when you might be totally flooded with emotion. That might be positive emotion or that might be negative emotion. So if you are angry or you're stressed or you're disappointed, if you're euphoric, right? The time to ask for a raise is when your boss just made a deal, right? These are the kinds of things that influence our decision making. The best thing to do when you're in a situation where you're not decision fit, when you're faced with a decision, is try to get out of that situation. You know, take a walk, right? Don't send the email at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, right? Come back on Monday and reread it. Right? Maybe you're even madder by that time, you know. But recognize your own state and be able to create some distance. The other thing is we know a lot about the traps and the biases. So first of all, learn about them so that you're aware, because forewarned is forearmed. And secondly, find ways to create some space between these different things so you can do something about the biases. So many people know that the reason why we're very afraid of flying, for example, is because we don't feel like we're in control. Well, a lot of people didn't fly after September 11th, and there were an extra 1,000 deaths in cars, statistically, from the increase in driving. So we're very scared about these things that, in fact, it's more dangerous to drive than it is to fly. Except that's not the way that we react. So it helps to know about these things where you can kind of calm yourself down and say, well, how big is the risk really?
Let's bring out the interesting issue, so some of these somatic markers, right, they came up evolutionarily, right, for some function, and they serve some purpose. And some of these purposes maybe still exist and some don't, right? So it's hard to tell kind of, when you have a gut feeling, which kind of gut feeling is it? Is it the airplane kind, or is it the one that really you should pay attention to?
That's right. And so that's why you want to balance the head and heart. If the heart's saying something that you can't reconcile with your head, spend some time trying to tease it out.
In fact, decision analysts call this extending the conversation of the formal concept. And they even sometimes will draw probability distributions about how much their probabilities will change with thinking in advance. Sorry, you go ahead.
No. There's this related story of, I think, of Raifa in Colombia and his students seeing walking back and forth very uneasy and asking what's the problem. He said, I have this I like it here, but I have this offer to go to Harvard and it's hard to decide whether to take it or not. So the students tell him, what's the problem? Just apply this great decision theory tool you've been teaching us. And he looks at them kind of puzzled and said, what do you mean? This is serious.
I have to say that Ron Howard, after a lecture once, I went up to him and I was talking to him about the challenge with framing a problem, because if you change the frame, your decisions are highly sensitive to your frame, and there's no science to making a frame. And so that sort of puts the whole process in somewhat into a heuristic kind of milieu. And so he went off and said, there are certain things you just don't apply decision analysis to, like matters of romance. And he went on about this topic. And I'm not sure whether or not you really can abstract take anything off the table when it comes to that chain, to tell you the truth.
What he refers to as big D versus little d decisions. So comfort in little d decisions using this kind of framework, maybe in the big D kind of decisions where it's something that's more cosmic or spiritual. It's not the time that you're analyzing with only the rational mind.
Perhaps related questions, both of you. There's a lot of software geeks in the room, do you talk about the role of technology in decision making, or as a tool, or how decision making may take place in machines?
You put it to both of us. What do you think?
Like automated computers that can do decision making.
I think.
That was a very good decision.
So decision aids are becoming better and better. And I think you all have a much better sense of where that is. But I remember seeing an Economist article that was talking about precisely these things and how to augment functions on the battlefield, for example. And it's going to get more and more like that. And at the same time, there are things that computers can do that humans are better at. And we don't want to give all of the control over to the computer. So it's going to be an interesting discussion and philosophical trip to figure out where this all goes. I mean, I heard about someone saying, well, the best computer is the computer you don't see. And what I really want is to have the screen be the back of my retina. And just sort of have what I want to see there, and no one knows. And people are with their glasses with the projection and everything, and videoing every moment of their lives and storing it all. So we'll see. It's a brave new world.
I'm just guessing, knowing Stuart, I'm guessing I would interpret his question a little bit differently, and he can decide which one is better interpretation. But I enjoyed both your answer. I think you're talking about what implications does this methodology have for an automated decision-making system that's autonomous, if it can happen. And all I can say is that a couple of students, David recommended in their report, but took decision analysis at Stanford and decided to try to revolutionize AI with these concepts and principles of action under uncertainty and value of information, and even more so value of computation to control and guide how resources are spent on making action better in the world. And so it helped to, I think, add a new lens on intelligence, automation of intelligence.
Also, he talked about how computers are better at some things and humans are better at other. Well, the decision that chart, what happens, how you make a good decision. I think it works extremely well. It works extremely well for a machine, because the machine, it can calculate all that stuff in seconds, in less than seconds, in milliseconds. So it'll be really machines, using that system would be really efficient.
Do you, as a follow-up, if you wouldn't mind, Zach, do you look forward to the day that a computer could help you make decisions or make decisions on your behalf?
Well, I hope we don't have like 2001 HAL kind of thing, but that would be very useful. Thanks.
Well, in the simplest form, I guess a computer can be an unbiased friend or an unbiased mirror, much the way I guess a psychologist keeps repeating questions that you answer. I had a good friend who was director of research at Georgia Tech, commensurate geek, and he's been married 3 times. Anyway, each time he was thinking about it, he would write a spreadsheet, and he would have the spreadsheet be a wizard, and he would answer these kind of unbiased questions one at a time, not look at the answer, and then he'd total the score. And if it was ever lopsided more than a certain percent, he went and proposed.
Computers have a way of going.
So it's probably
I've heard of women doing a similar thing.
I wonder what they were doing.
In terms of a ranking. So it's not only one-sided.
So for decisions like, for example, which school to go to, sometimes you end up with like Harvard or Stanford are equally good choices. Do you just flip the coin then and say?
Exactly, right? So if you've got 2 good alternatives, then it doesn't necessarily make a big difference between one or the other. They're both high in their expected value. So what we like to say, you flip the coin, right? And as you're about to call it, if you find yourself wishing for one over the other, you grab the coin, you put it in your pocket, and you make the decision. Right? So that's when the heart tells you which way you want to go, and at that point, you're just happy that you've done all the schoolwork to get you in that place. Would it be that all kids had that choice?
Okay.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thanks for coming.